I think military spouses just come with this really unique set of challenges and experience and benefits. I think it takes a lot of patience, selflessness, and I think even more patience. I think we abide by the hurry up and wait perspective at our house. I kind of feel like we're always in a state of transition.
Yeah.
Moving every couple of years. By the time you get settled, it's time to go for the next place, time to plan and for the next move. So in that aspect, it's really hard. From the military spouse perspective, we're not deploying, we're not on the front lines, but I think a lot of us still experience a lot of that fear and uncertainty and sometimes trauma, just as the service member does. And I think that's oftentimes overlooked. It's incredibly overwhelming. When our spouse is in the field, they're deployed, they're TDY, they're training, oftentimes all of those roles fall on the spouse. And, with kids, it takes a toll. And, we see it within, military mental health on the spouse side as well. I think back to some of the deployments and such, Murphy's Law, anything that could go wrong did. And so just overcoming a lot of the challenges. Looking back, it's funny. At the time, it was not so funny, but now I can look back and smile.
Yeah. Hello, Leading with Vulnerability podcast listeners and watchers on YouTube. I'd like to welcome you to the last episode of season 2 of the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. Before we get into this final episode with Betsy Mercado, which I'll talk about in just a second, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone out there for listening and watching the podcast, and then a special shout out and thank you to my patrons out there. Thank you so much for your monetary support. You motivate me and keep me going every week when I'm producing and doing all this stuff and trying to get out good quality content to all the listeners. I'll tell you what, season 2 was an amazing season. I had 10,000 plus listens and views, which if you're looking at like Joe Rogan podcast and some of the other big podcasts out there, that's nothing. That's a weekend. But when I'm thinking about Yuma Barnett talking about vulnerability, 10,000 plus views and listeners is a big deal. And it's a big deal because it made an impact. And I'll share one story that you may have heard before, but on a recent episode that I had with Chris Higgins, who was a former platoon leader of mine when I was a first sergeant in Delta Company 375, who went to Harvard, ended up leaving the military and going to McKinsey and being a consultant. I had another PL reach out to me shortly after the episode aired. He was a PL with me at the same time in Delta Company, and he said, I had no idea that Chris had gotten out and went to McKinsey. This other PL who reached out, he said he's about to get out of the military and he really wanted to go into consulting and was really looking hard at McKinsey. So because of this podcast, he was able to find out that somebody he knew was in a position where he wanted to be, and they were able to link up and hopefully have a fruitful conversation and get onto some career aspirations for him. So that's the power of one, and much less 10,000, which hopefully there were some other impacts out there and many that I didn't hear about. And there was plenty of other calls and texts and messages that I got over the course of season 2, which just motivate the heck out of me and keep me going on. As far as season 3, that'll start airing in April, and I've already got a couple episodes in the bank. I got Air Force retired for 30 years, David Nordell, who has a fantastic story, a fantastic outlook on life, and uses words like maximum fabulous, which tune in April to hear more about that. And I have the CEO of the Honor Foundation, which I'm sure some of you have heard me talk about, Matt Stevens, former Navy SEAL, first Navy SEAL to come on the show. I'm sure I gave him a little bit of a hard time about that, but there's just a couple of the episodes that we have in the bank. And for this final episode of season 2, I have Betsy Mercado. She called in from Korea, where her husband is currently stationed. She's a military spouse, a wife, a mother. And she's also the executive director at Objective Zero. And any of you who follow me and follow my journey, Objective Zero is something that I am running a fundraising event for to help get at this veteran suicide epidemic that we have going on in our country. And hopefully I can give a little bit of funds to Objective Zero and get one domino to fall, because you all have heard it. If I believe very much in the power of one. And if we can move one to get help and move one domino, hopefully we can get the rest to fall and we can get at it. Because I think at the end of the day, the objective when it comes to veteran suicide is zero. The objective is zero. So I hope you guys enjoy her story. We had, she's all the way from Korea. There's some connectivity issues in there, but I know the point of the podcast is going to get across. And make sure you follow me and be there. And please come out and support me. Tune into the live stream on March 4th over on the Valhalla Cowboy YouTube channel, and probably here also on the Leading with Vulnerability YouTube channel. We're going to stream for 24 hours. We're going to have some callers call in and talk to us over that time. And got some other Ranger veterans that are going to get on there and stream with me and hopefully raise a little bit of coinage for Objective Zero and the great things that they're doing over there. But I just wanted to, before the episode got started, say thank you. Thank you for tuning in to season 2, and be prepared for season 3 when it comes out here in April. So let's get to Betsy and her podcast. Welcome to the Leading with Vulnerability podcast. I'm your host, Yuma Barnett, and today I have a very special guest from Korea, which will be the first time I've had a guest out of country on the podcast. So I'm really thankful for Betsy Mercado for taking time. It's 8:00 here in Georgia, and I think it's like 9 p.m. or later in Korea. So thanks for coming on, early this morning here and late at night there where you are. But Betsy is a military spouse, wife, mother, but she's also the executive director of Objective Zero, which is something that we're going to get into the detail about. But I'm not going to monopolize the time and steal the thunder from Betsy. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and we'll get on with the conversation.
Well, thank you so much, Yuma, for having me. I'd like the opportunity to share a little bit more about myself and in Objective Zero. I'm from the Midwest, born and raised in South Dakota. Married my husband in 2000 and been a military spouse ever since. He enlisted in the Army. Our first duty station was in Alaska. 9/11 occurred. He decided to go to green to gold and got out of the Army, went back to school for a couple of years, then commissioned as an infantry officer. And since then, we've lived in Georgia 3 times, Colorado, Germany, Virginia, Hawaii 2 times, and now in Korea. I've spent most of the last 20 plus years in a volunteer role, leading family readiness groups, coaching soccer, got my business degree, and then my master's in human services, and then co-founded the Objective Zero Foundation. And I've been the executive director here for 5 years now. And I think one of my most important things and roles is a mom. I've got 2 kids that are in college.
Nice. Well, when you're talking there and about all the places you've been, that's the one thing I'm jealous about, is spending most of my time in the 75th Ranger Regiment. I spent almost my entire career in Georgia, except for a small stint in Sydney, Australia. But you guys have got to bounce around and see a lot of different things and do what the recruiters told me I was going to do when I first joined, was travel and see the world. And I'm a little bit jealous of that. That it's great. It also has its struggles when you move around that much, and I know it does, especially on the officer side, because you're on a kind of a 2-year cycle everywhere you go, and I know that's difficult. And we'll talk about that a little bit. Before we get any deeper in the conversation, I always start off, ask my guests what their definition of vulnerability is.
It's a really great question. I really think about vulnerability and the courage to put yourself out there, sharing your experiences and being your truth. With my line of work, I think vulnerability is the foundation of connection. It allows us to build those connections, and it shows that we're human, we're not perfect. And I think most importantly, it allows us to empathize with others.
Yeah, absolutely. I think very simple definition, but I think it's right on point and is along the same tune as many of my other guests that have came on the show in the past. So you hold one of the, if not the most challenging positions in the world that is underappreciated, undervalued, and misunderstood a lot, and that's that of a military spouse. I would just kind of like your perspective on what it was like as a military spouse. And as part of that, I get a lot of service members that are pre 9/11 and the impact 9/11 kind of had on their careers, but we never really talk about the wife that's sitting there watching 9/11 happen and knowing that their significant other, their spouse's life is probably about to take a significant turn in a different direction to support, and which it did for 20 plus years there. Like your perspective on all those things.
We had flown back from New York the day before 9/11. We had gone to a Buffalo Bills game, came back to Alaska. um, woke up and, turned on the news and were just, couldn't believe what happened, what was happening. And my husband decided that he wanted to become an officer. He wanted to do green to gold. And so he ended up getting out less than 2 months after 9/11 to go to school, went to University of South Dakota. He ended up doing almost 4 years of college in two because he was afraid he was going to deploying.
Oh, right.
Little did he know that he would deploy 5 times over, the over his career thus far. I think military spouses just come with this really unique set of challenges and experience and benefits. I think it takes a lot of patience, selflessness, and I think even more patience. I think we abide by the hurry up and wait perspective at our house. I kind of feel like we're always in a state of transition.
Yeah.
Moving every couple of years. By the time you get settled, it's time to go for the next place, or time to plan and for the next move. So in that aspect, it's really hard. From the military spouse perspective, we're not deploying, we're not on the front lines, but, I think a lot of us still experience a lot of that fear and uncertainty and sometimes trauma, just as the service member does. And I think that's oftentimes overlooked. It's incredibly overwhelming, when our spouse is in the field, they're deployed, they're TDY, they're training, oftentimes all of those roles fall on the spouse. And, with kids, it takes a toll. And, we see it within the military mental health on the spouse side as well.
Yeah.
I think back to some of the deployments and such, Murphy's Law, anything that could go wrong did. And so just overcoming a lot of the challenges. Looking back, it's funny. At the time, it was not so funny, but now I can look back and smile.
Yeah, that's funny. I would like your thoughts on. So when you're moving as much, I know I didn't move as much as you guys did, and a lot of my officer counterparts because of the career I chose. But I moved quite a few times, 6 or 8 times in my military career. And you're right. When you move somewhere and you can already see the light at the end of the tunnel that you're going to move again. So how do you try to make a house a home? Is it little things like deliberately unpacking everything and hanging things on the wall? Because I know I've moved to houses and there's boxes that we never unpacked and there's pictures we never hung until we were leaving to go to the next place. And we go, man, I wish we would have hung that up. I haven't seen that picture in years and stuff. So what are some of the steps that you took to try to, create a balance and a home environment for you, the family, the kids, and all that?
So when the movers came and dropped all our stuff off, we have them unpack everything, take all the boxes, take all the wrapping paper, everything. And so we're forced to go through everything and put everything away. Over the years, we have decluttered a lot just because we're, the amount of stuff that we've accumulated over the years. Luckily, we were able to move to Korea. We put over half of our stuff in storage. So like we were unpacked in a day and everything was up on the walls because we didn't put a lot. So I think keeping the house uncluttered and establishing your household and just kind of your life as soon as you can makes things a little bit easier.
Yeah, I agree. I can definitely I feel you with the clutter. If your husband's anything like me, I have a garage full of green duffel bags that are just full of stuff, and I'm scared to throw it away because I never knew what they were going to ask for me to turn back in. So there was this little, this pile of stuff that followed us everywhere we went. And I was so glad when I finally retired and was able to either turn it in or get rid of some of that stuff. And I say I was glad. I know my wife was very happy to get rid of some of that stuff. Those green duffel bags, they're not something that they don't look good in the corner sitting over there. It's not very aesthetically pleasing looking at all that stuff. So on top of being a military spouse, you're a mom. It's a struggle in general for a military spouse, and then when you add kids to the mix, you are, like you said, when the deployments and the training events, you have to wear all the hats. What are some of the things that you did to keep your sanity? Just what are some of the stuff you did just to keep things going when Dad was out of the house?
Yeah, it's hard because as the adults we make the conscious choice to join the military, marry someone that's in the military, or plans on serving, and so actually made the most sacrifices than myself or my husband did. I can look back now because my kids are both in college, or we're empty nesters, and seeing just how much they had on kind of all the decisions we made. When we were, sometimes we had the option and had a say in where my husband would be stationed, the duty stations. And so, that was kind of our input, my input, and the kids' input. They actually had a say in, like, okay, these are the options. Where do you guys want to go? For us, schools were really important, making sure that activities were available, both scholastic activities and, sports and such. And so being able to kind of plan ahead. So as soon as we knew, okay, we're moving to Colorado Springs. Okay, what do they have? Do they have jujitsu gyms? Do they have wrestling gyms? What are the best schools? And making sure that our kids had access to those activities so that we could stay involved. Specifically when deployed, the more busy we stayed and stuck to routine, the better outcomes. Because life, your husband deploys, your spouse deploys, life goes on. The kids still have to go to school. You might have to go to work, and so keeping and establishing those routines, I think, was most helpful because we all knew what to expect on a day-to-day basis. Dad knew our routine, would call when he could. He was, early mornings, late nights, lots of pictures going back and forth. Just so he could stay involved in their lives as well. I think keeping that service center part of your daily life was just as important because, they were missing out a lot. I'm sure, you've experienced it as well. You miss out on so much that, how do you keep that parent involved?
Yeah, absolutely. And then when did you start becoming part of the FRG? Was that early on before your husband transitioned over to the officer side or after that?
It was after. He was actually a captain by the time I started getting involved. Unfortunately, there's not so great spouses out there and not so great FRGs, and kind of stayed away from it for a while just because it was pretty toxic. But my husband had 3 company commands. I was able to be an FRG leader for those 3 commands, and he was on a PRT, provincial reconstruction team, and so I served as the FRG leader for kind of that joint role, not just Army, but there was Air Force on that team as well.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you make the FRG it's a strange dynamic. It changes with unit, it changes with platoon. Every platoon's got a little different. And my wife and I kind of took the approach early on as hands off of FRG, and then I realized, I'm a leader. As I'm part of this, I can either be part of the solution or I can be part of the problem because I saw that there's definitely benefit in having a strong family readiness group, especially when we started having casualties and the deployments were back to back to back to back. It's very important to have there. What are your thoughts, just overall, grand art? We could hardly have a whole episode to talk about FRG groups and stuff, but to somebody out there that's listening that might be new to the military, what would you say to them, or what advice would you give them?
I think getting involved is one of the best things that you can do. I think overall, FRG, family readiness groups, are a great way to make sure that the families are taken care of. That was one of my husband's first command. They were deploying to Afghanistan, and making sure that every spouse knew kind of the process. They had their powers of attorney, that we made sure they could access their banking information. We had like a 17-year-old spouse who didn't drive. Like, how do we make sure that she's not just staying at home all the time while her spouse is gone? So I think overall it can be a very, very good experience. If you go into it with good intentions, you'll leave the drama at the door, and you have a purpose. It's not just the social aspect. It really is part of the resiliency and the readiness of that for that service member. You can go off and deploy, and you know that your family is taken care of. You can focus on your job, and that for us was most important.
Yeah, I agree 100%. The FRG can be a very powerful tool when done correctly, and you go into it. And it's sometimes I don't think we look at it deep enough, right? We are, as leaders, military leaders and military families, we're helping people understand how to be husbands and fathers, and we're doing more than just teaching them how to do battle drills and combat tactics or whatever your job might be. You're setting the example for them in all phases of their life because, as you know, the military is very diverse, and a lot of people. I came from a broken home into the military, and I learned a lot about being a father from some of my military leaders because I watched how they did it, and I watched how they sacrificed time at work. They could have stayed at work an extra hour, but they went home and coached the soccer team, and they did those things to be present in their families' lives. And I think that's the power of the FRG. If you do it right and you have the right intentions, it can set up people for the military success, your unit, and relieve pressure, but it can also set you up for the rest of your life as a husband, father, wife, whatever it is. Do you feel the same?
Oh, absolutely. I think, if I were to give advice to that new military spouse, would be to find your people. And I think
Yeah.
that's for that new service member as well. You need to find that support network that's going to be your biggest cheerleader and supporter, the ones that you can call anytime, day or night, when you have an emergency or you just need a vet, need a coffee date, whatever it is. Um, and then people that you can be yourself and honest with. And I think that you can find that both within the military community and out of the military community, just to have that support network. Because I've learned that everyone's kind of struggling in one way or another, and you need to have that support system to fall back on. And also, I think what a lot of people fail to realize is how much impact that spouse can have on that service member's career, good and bad.
Absolutely.
That teamwork between husband and wife, or spouse and spouse, husband and husband, wife and wife, whatever it may be. My husband credits a lot of his success to me being there and being supportive, and I cannot be supportive, he may have not been as successful. And so I think that role for both the service member and the spouse, back and forth, and that teamwork and that collaboration and communication is just as important.
Yeah. And my wife and I have spoke about it often, privately and on the podcast, that we've always said for new military spouses, or even if you're, been in the military spouse environment for a while. Well, she always said that the most important thing for you as a spouse is you got to have your own life as well. You can't plan your whole life around your husband's training calendar, events, what he's doing when he goes to work, when he comes home. You got to do something outside of, like, you got to have your own rhythm, your own battle rhythm, your own battle drills, your own thing. She got her master's degree while I was still on active duty, but that was key to her mental health, was having her own thing going on. And I was wondering if you have something similar, or have advice for some of those spouses that might be kind of struggling to find those people out there.
Yeah, I think, find things that you love, get involved in your kids' activities. That's kind of some of the things that where I found really great friends. And, I meant to talk about this earlier. Spouse underemployment and unemployment is a huge thing in the military. We've got so many families that are struggling financially because that spouse can't maintain a job. Employers don't want to hire because the uncertainty, and just it's a risk hiring a military spouse. And so, finding a career, getting your degree, learning, getting certificates, having that identity outside of just being a military spouse, because at some point that military spouse career is going to end as well, or the spouse's career is going to end. And so you need to have that identity outside, or I think it's like a huge problem once you're out of the military.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, it goes back to, something we always say to transitioning service members is you got to build your network. Because when you eventually the military is going to end, right? It's going to end, and you're still going to have quite a bit of life in front of you. So you got to start building your network early. And I think it goes the same way for spouses, getting out, getting active with the FRG in your community, and and stuff like that will start to build that network. So when you do transition as a family, you can hopefully go back to them and find employment, or have activities outside of the service. So it's a rewarding life, the military life, but it's also very challenging.
I would agree.
Yeah, and that'll bring us to what you're doing now, with Objective Zero, which I love the name. I think it's so just on point, because that should be the objective when we're talking about veteran suicide, veteran mental health. What is Objective Zero? What are its origins? What can you tell us about it?
Objective Zero is a tech nonprofit that's connecting service members, veterans, their families, and caregivers to a global network of peer support through voice, video, and text. And we do that through the Objective Zero app. We're different than your traditional crisis hotlines, text lines, and warm lines, in that our community members, our app users, have the ability to filter through our network to find someone most like them. And that's based on their age, gender, location, branch of service, where they've deployed to. And we're actually building in some additional filters. But and we also have different resources that span from yoga and meditation to free or low-cost mental health care. Just a variety of resources that aid with mental health and wellness. And to discuss kind of the origins of Objective Zero, it was 2014, and my co-founder Justin Miller was struggling with his transition out of the Army. Was substance abuse issues, a lot of pain, traumatic brain injury, suicidal. He reached out for help and couldn't get an appointment to be seen for 2 days. He was posting his struggles over social media, and my husband Chris recognized that something was going on, and so the two of them talked on the phone for over 6 hours one night. And Chris didn't have any training outside the military. I think it was ACE training at the time still. But he knew to ask Justin if he was suicidal. And Justin kind of laughed and said, my weapons were loaded the night before. We wouldn't be having this conversation. The two of them spoke, I think it was over 6 hours, and it really sparked the idea that simple act of listening can save lives. And we wanted to replicate that call on a grander scale. And we thought to use technology to do it. And so from there, Objective Zero app was created.
Yeah, so I've researched the app. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but for me, if I need help, if I'm struggling, I can use the app and I can filter it down and find somebody that matches me better or that I would be more comfortable with to hopefully have that first conversation, right? Which I think is so very important. It's that first step. I always say in the military, the hardest thing to do is initiate movement. And I think the hardest thing to do in mental health is initiate movement and take that first step. And hopefully, if you can connect with somebody that's from this, cut from the same cloth that you are, that'll be that first step to the next step, which is maybe whatever it is, a treatment facility, professional help. But it's that first step. And I know for me personally, I've received phone calls from former service members because they were comfortable with me, and that was their first step, right? That they were on the edge, and I was able to help them get to the professional that they needed because I'm not the professional, but I was able to be that first intervention. And I think that's kind of what Objective Zero is, right? It makes it easier for the service member to get connected with somebody, hopefully that they were willing to be vulnerable with and start the process. Is that right?
That's absolutely correct. We found that with these filters, it builds a shortcut to trust because you're talking with someone that's been where you've been, done what you've done, and seen what you've seen. And so I think at least we've experienced and witnessed that people our veterans are willing to open up to someone that truly understand. The other person on the end of that call or that text or that video chat is not there to make a dime. They're there because they've either been in that position themselves or they've known someone that is, and they just want to be there. And so you've got someone on the other end of that line that truly wants to help or just listen. It's not even just it's just sometimes for some just listening, just getting whatever is off on your chest off. Yeah. And so it's been remarkable to see some of these connections being made within the app.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so you've been in that. How long have you been in with the Objective Zero? When did it first start?
2017 is when the app launched. We established it in 2016.
Okay. So in that time in this nonprofit space, what are some of the challenges that you guys face, during startup to where you are now to keep Objective Zero going?
I think that the very first challenge was fundraising. I think that's always going to be a challenge is bringing those dollars in to keep it going because we offer this for free. We don't want to charge anyone to use the Objective Zero app. We actually got started on a Kickstarter campaign in 2017. We raised $38,000 to start the development of the Objective Zero app. And so, it was friends, family, and strangers that believed in our idea. And so the Kickstarter itself was a whole, I could do another podcast on that one. It was an experience. Now we're in this space where we're starting to grow. We've been able to support over 14,000 veterans and service members and family members since we launched the app. And we're building version 2.0 of the app that should be released within the next month or so. We're going to be testing this month with additional tools, a mood journal, a symptom tracker, So for us is how do we keep veterans that might be in crisis or headed down that crisis engaged? How do we keep them healthy? How do we aid in their wellness? And so building some of these new features is really important for us um, to to be part of that path to wellness for that veteran or service member or family member.
Yeah.
Another challenge that was a little bit unexpected is the competition within the nonprofit world. Veterans, VSOs specifically, was not prepared for that. We take a very collaborative approach. If we can't help a veteran, we'll make sure that we get them connected to a resource that will help them, because our app is not for everyone. But other organizations are unwilling to kind of share each other as a resource. They see it as, if we get funding, we're taking their money. If we help veterans, we're helping their veterans. It's really quite disgusting, and
Yeah.
I was not mentally prepared for that, unfortunately.
Yeah, I agree. And there's last time I checked, there was like 49,000 veteran nonprofits out there trying to do stuff. And I spent a good portion of my time trying to vet and see who was actually practicing what they preach. And it can be a dirty, disheartening world in the nonprofit space, because it's really misnamed in a way, because you have to profit to make a nonprofit run, which is kind of it is what it is, and I'm sure it's a challenge. And you're the I don't hear a lot of nonprofit VSOs in the tech space. Was there certain challenges in the tech space? Was it more logistically or financially, or what was it when it came just to the tech side of Objective Zero?
So fortunately, a couple of our co-founders had that technical background that really helped get us off the ground. We have an amazing tech team. We have a development firm that we've hired and contract out to do our development work. But using technology is really, really great, because you can reach people where they are. But when the technology doesn't work, then you can't help anyone. And so we're kind of always on our toes, making sure that there aren't bugs, that AWS isn't going out, because if AWS, the cloud goes out, like our app doesn't function, you can't access anything. And so there are things that are outside of control that we can't do anything about. So there's a lot of patience. Technology can be pretty finicky sometimes, but we wanted to do something different, and at the time, no one was using an app to connect veterans to one another. And so you got some really great existing hotlines out there that you can dial a number and get connected to another veteran.
Yeah.
And we wanted to use technology and wireless technology to do it.
Yeah, awesome. So if somebody wants to become part of Objective Zero, either as a looking for help or to help, how does it work?
So anyone can go down to the Apple Store or Google Play Store, the Apple App Store, and download the app. If you don't have a smartphone or prefer just to use our web app, we have a version right on our website. You don't have to download anything. You can just access the app immediately. It's all free. If you go to our website, objectivezero.org, you can learn more about how to volunteer. We offer all of our training online and different ways to get involved, to donate. Some really great information online as well on our website to learn more.
Yeah. So absolutely, if you're out there and if you're in either bucket, you need help, or you're trying to figure out how you can help somebody, either as part of the mentorship type side of it, or financially, go to their website, some great information, and help them out. And that'll bring us to, there is an opportunity through this podcast. And for those of you who are familiar with the Valhalla Cowboy, my crazy counterpart over here, is we're doing a live stream on March 4th, which is, everybody who knows me, a very significant day in my life, when my roommate Matthew Commons and other service members were killed in Afghanistan back in 2002. So we're going to live stream playing Call of Duty for 24 hours, and we're going to give all the proceeds to Objective Zero to help them on their journey to get at this mental health and this suicide epidemic that has really hit our veterans. And I think a lot of people think, the war's over, it's slowed down. Hopefully, some of this stuff will slow down. But I will tell you from my own experience, it's when it slows down that the mental health side sometimes becomes the worst. It becomes the most difficult because personally, for me, that's when been able to set back and reflect on those 16 deployments and some of the things I saw and some of the things that I did. And I think the need for help is not going to decrease in the near future. It's probably going to only increase. And I think Objective Zero is a great way to help our veterans lead lives, outside of service that are fulfilling and help them, be better, just human beings, and hopefully find happiness again outside of the uniform, which can be really, really difficult. Um, Betsy, I really appreciate you coming on and sharing a little bit about the Objective Zero story and what you guys are doing. You guys are doing amazing, amazing things. I say it all the time. It's the power of one. If we can get one domino to fall, hopefully the rest of them will follow suit, and we can get to this. We can provide a solution to this problem out there. And if it's not Objective Zero, it's not your thing. Go somewhere else. Find another cup of tea, or just pick up the phone and call an old Ranger buddy, an old Marine friend, or whatever it is, and start that process to healing. But there is one question that I ask of everybody, Betsy, before we go off the show, kind of like the vulnerability, is I always like to know if you could go back and talk to that new military spouse, what advice would you give her?
That's a phenomenal question. I think I would tell Betsy 20 plus years ago to take that leap of faith, to get involved, to step out of your comfort zone. My first couple of years as a military spouse was really hard and really lonely. There was no social media. I don't think I even had a cell phone at that time. I was up in Alaska in the winter. It was, pretty awful. So I wish I would have gotten involved. I've seen the military make some really phenomenal strides in their family advocacy and their family programs and the resources available to spouses. And I didn't have that, when I was young, and I wish I did. And I wish I would have made some of those connections that I have now as a more seasoned spouse. It would have made things a lot easier, and that it does get a whole lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I know my wife probably shares some of the same sentiments there. It can be daunting at first, can be very scary at first when you're, we've all seen it, the 18-year-old spouse who came from the Midwest or the out West where I came from, middle of nowhere, into a military environment. But I think my wife was surprised how welcoming the other spouses were once she finally stepped out of her comfort zone, and she made some lifelong friends, the people that she still talks to today. And the military, along with its challenges and everything, is a great place. It's a great place to be. Yeah, like you've traveled the world on the government dime and seen things that most people only dream of. And but with that, thank you for everything you've done with Objective Zero. You found somewhere that there's a need, and you took action, which is more than a lot of people can say. And I thank you for that. And hopefully I can raise a little bit of money for you and help the cause, because I'm just I started this podcast because I was sick of seeing my friends kill themselves, right, and get divorced and go down a path of into a dark place. And hopefully we can help. I can help you bring a few more back to the light. So thanks for coming on the show, and thanks for taking time this evening in Korea.
Thank you so much, Ema. I really appreciate it.